Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're plunging into something pretty special, I think. The legacy of a film that, well, it completely changed the game for zombie movies 28 days later.
It really did. Made them fast, made them terrifying in a whole new way.
Exactly. And now, decades on, we've got its successor 28 years later, released in 2025, and it's already causing quite a stir.
That's putting it mildly.
So that's our focus for this deep dive. We've gone through the reviews, production details, bits of interviews, trying to get a real handle on this thing, especially since the director, Danny Boyle, he flat out said it's not what you'll expect at all.
Right. And that's our mission here, isn't it? To unpack what makes it tick, why it's hitting some people one way and, well, others quite differently.
Yeah.
Why it's proving so, let's say, divisive.
Yeah, divisive is the word.
We're looking at the creative risks, the themes, which feel incredibly relevant right now, and yeah, how it might be trying to shake up the horror genre again. And it's interesting, Sony, the distributor, they kept a lot under wraps beforehand.
They really did, which usually signals something unconventional is coming. So let's quickly touch on that legacy. 28 days later, back in 2002. Groundbreaking stuff, fast-infected, gritty realism.
Totally revitalized the genre. And then 28 weeks later, in 2007, kept that intensity going, maybe even ramped it up in some ways, though, with a different director.
But now Boyle's back, Alex Garland's back writing. You'd think it's a guaranteed formula, right?
You would think. But almost immediately the buzz was, well, words like unhinged and divisive started popping up everywhere in the reviews.
That's what jumps out at me too. Unhinged and divisive, especially coming off Boyle saying it's unexpected. So digging into the material, what's driving that? What makes it feel unhinged to people?
Well, it seems like it really leans away from, standard horror movie beats. And maybe more importantly, it sidesteps what fans might expect or even demand from a sequel this long awaited.
The expectation trap.
Exactly. Boyle and Garland, they're known for not just repeating themselves, right? They like to subvert things. And it feels like they've prioritized their artistic vision, maybe, over just giving people more of the same.
So art over fan service, essentially.
That seems to be the consensus in a lot of the analysis. Terms like artful chaos keep appearing. Critics are saying it's the exact opposite of a nostalgic legacy sequel, which is brave.
But risky.
Oh, definitely risky.
Yeah.
It's the kind of move that could really thrill some people looking for something different, but yeah, potentially alienate others who wanted that nostalgic hit.
Okay, artful chaos. I like that phrase, but what does it actually mean in practice? What does it look like on screen? Is it just messy, or is there a method to the madness?
Right. It seems to show up in a few key ways.
Right.
The pacing is apparently quite unusual. It's not just constant action, and the visual style is very distinct, which we can get into more detail on. But narratively, yeah, it doesn't seem to follow that predictable blockbuster structure. It's more interested in the emotional fallout, the thematic weight, rather than just stacking up scares or set pieces.
Gotcha. So aside from the style and the feel, what's the actual story here? Where does 28 years later pick things up? Who are we following this time?
Okay, so the basic setup is this. We find a group of survivors who've managed to carve out a life on this small, very isolated island.
Whereabouts?
It's the holy island of Lindisfarne up in Northumberland, England. Really stark, windswept place. You get the sense they're trying to seal themselves off completely.
A fortress against the past, almost. And who's at the center of this little community?
There's a core family unit. You've got Jamie, played by Aaron Taylor Johnson.
Hi.
Isla, played by Jodie Comer. Apparently she's unwell, and they're trying to reach a Dr. Kilson for help.
Jodie Comer, interesting casting.
Yeah. And then there's their young son, Spike. He's played by Alfie Williams. And this family, they seem to be the real heart of the story, the people you're invested in, as things inevitably start to unravel.
And it sounds like the young actor, Alfie Williams, really makes an impact. People are calling him the emotional anchor.
Absolutely. Reviews are singling out his performance. They talk about watching his character, Spike, go through this kind of slow erosion of childhood innocence. He's forced to grow up way too fast in this world.
That sounds incredibly powerful and tough to watch, probably.
I imagine so. It grounds the whole thing. And speaking of strong performances, Ralph Fiennes is in it too, as the Dr. Kelson they're trying to reach. Apparently he's quite scene-stealing.
Oh, wow. Fiennes in a zombie movie.
Right. And Ed Van Riding is in there as a Swedish NATO soldier named Eric. Oh, and Jack O'Connell pops up too, which was apparently a bit of a surprise.
Quite the ensemble cast then.
Definitely. That's a lot of weight.
Okay, so we have this set up the characters. Let's talk about the deeper stuff. You mentioned themes earlier. What is 28 years later really trying to explore beyond just, running from rage-infected people?
It seems pretty layered. Connecting it back to the bigger picture, you see a lot about family, obviously. Those bonds, what people will do for each other. Sacrifice comes up a lot. And grief, just this pervasive sense of loss that hangs over everything. Not just personal grief for the characters, but this kind of societal scar tissue from the original outbreak. How does a world even begin to heal from that?
And I picked up on some definite political undertones in the discussions. The setting, post-Brexit Britain, that feels intentional.
Very much so, it seems. The idea of borders, quarantines, this desperate attempt to feel safe by walling yourself off Holy Island becomes this potent symbol, doesn't it? Like a nation trying to isolate itself.
Yeah, but the virus comes back.
Exactly. It serves as this grim reminder that maybe no wall is high enough. No border truly secure when something like the rage virus exists. It really does hold that mirror up, as you say, to some very current anxieties about borders and belonging.
It makes you think. And it's impossible not to connect that to more recent events too, right? The COVID-19 pandemic.
Oh, absolutely. Reviewers point out how the film really taps into that collective trauma, that fear we all experienced. It makes the whole scenario feel terrifyingly plausible again. That sense of fragility, of things falling apart. It hits differently now.
Yeah, it must. So weaving all that together, the family drama, the political edge, the pandemic resonance, it sounds incredibly ambitious for a horror sequel.
It really does. It's trying to juggle a coming-of-age story for Spike, this intense mother-son dynamic with Isla, and even these bigger, almost philosophical questions about death. Some describe parts of it as feeling almost nihilistic.
Nihilistic, how so?
Well, in the sense of questioning meaning or purpose in the face of just overwhelming devastation. Like, what's the point of surviving if the world is this broken?
Yeah.
Putting all these complex ideas into a survival horror framework. Well, apparently, that mix can feel jarring for some viewers.
I can see that. It's not just straightforward scares then.
Definitely not. It demands a bit more from the audience, it seems.
Let's shift to how it looks and feels, because one of the big talking points is how it was filmed, right? Largely on iPhones.
Yes, which sounds crazy for a movie this size, but apparently it's a key part of its aesthetic. That choice, along with Anthony Dogmantle returning cinematographer, he shot the original.
Oh, wow. He came back too.
Yeah. It creates this really specific texture. People describe it as jagged, almost like found footage or a documentary. It feels incredibly raw and immediate.
So it enhances that chaos.
Totally. Puts you right in the middle of the panic. You feel less like you're watching a polished movie and more like you're experiencing the breakdown.
And visually, beyond the iPhone look, what's the overall style?
It's described as having this very muted, almost desaturated color palette for the most part. Grays, blues, very bleak. But then it's punctuated by these sudden sharp bursts of blood red.
Striking contrast.
Very. And Boyle's editing style is there too, those sped up, frantic sequences we saw in the original Maker Return. Though interestingly, some reviews did mention finding some of the cuts a bit awkward, which might feed into that unhinged quality we talked about.
Right, the editing itself contributing to the feeling. So it's a zombie film, but you said it's not nonstop action. How does it handle the pacing?
It seems to be a real balancing act. There are definitely moments of intense, frenzied energy. There's apparently a scene involving crossing a causeway that's incredibly thrilling.
Okay.
But then it pairs that with equal amounts of quiet, contemplative moments, letting the characters breathe, letting the atmosphere sink in, which leads into a final act that seems to be one of the most divisive parts, precisely because it might lean more into that reflective space than just pure action.
Interesting. And the gore, the infected, still intense.
Oh, the makeup and practical effects are reportedly top-notch. Very gruesome, very realistic. But the consensus seems to be that it serves the story, the urgency, rather than just being gore for gore's sake.
And one detail that caught my eye, that the infected are often portrayed as very naked.
Yeah, that's mentioned quite a bit. It apparently adds this really unsettling primal quality to them, makes them feel less like movie monsters and more like, I don't know, raw, uncontained rage.
Wow. And wrapping all the sensory stuff together is the music.
Yes, the score is by Young Fathers, the band, and it's described as being really evocative, eclectic, this pulsing undercurrent that just amplifies the tension and the mood, really helps define the film's unique feel.
Sound like a complete sensory package then. Okay, let's look behind the curtain a bit and towards the future. Does the film introduce new ideas about the rage virus itself?
It seems like it does. It explores some fascinating ideas about the infected and how the virus might have evolved or changed over 28 years. Raises new questions, apparently. maybe doesn't answer all of them, but presents compelling new wrinkles to the lore.
Intriguing. And here's a fun bit of trivia I stumbled on. The trailer uses this really old specific recording. It's Rudyard Kipling's poem, Boots, read by Taylor Holmes back in 1915.
Oh, yeah. What's the significance?
Well, apparently that exact recording was used by the U.S. military in training exercises to simulate the psychological stress of being captured. How creepy is that for a trailer choice?
Whoa, that is unsettling. Talk about setting a tone. It hints at that deeper psychological horror, not just the physical threat.
Exactly. And looking ahead, this isn't just a one-off, is it? 28 years later is part 1.
That's the plan. It's officially the first installment of a new trilogy. Part 2 already has a title, Bone Temple, and it's supposedly aiming for release next January.
Wow, they're moving fast.
Seems like it. And there's tons of speculation, of course, about Cillian Murphy maybe returning as Jim for the third film.
Ah, the big question.
Right. And apparently this film, 28 years later, keeps mentioning the name Jim in different contexts, sort of teasingly.
Yeah.
So fans are definitely hoping for that full circle moment.
That would be huge. And financially, how did it do? Was it a risk that paid off?
It seems so. The budget was estimated around $60 million. And pretty quickly after release, it crossed that mark, grossing nearly $63 million worldwide.
So despite being divisive...
It found its audience, yeah. It connected strongly enough to be a financial success right out of the gate.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this up. 28 years later, it sounds like a really bold, definitely unhinged return to this world. Maybe not for everyone, but undeniably powerful and artistically ambitious.
I think that sums it up well. It's a film that seems to actively challenge what you expect or want from a sequel, especially in a beloved genre franchise. It forces you to engage with it on its own terms.
And it feels incredibly relevant, doesn't it? Holding that mirror up to our recent collective anxieties about fear, isolation, and how societies respond to crisis.
Absolutely. That contemporary resonance is maybe one of its strongest and perhaps most unsettling aspects. It feels like a story for right now, drawing on things we've all lived through.
So it leaves us thinking, doesn't it? The film explores mutation, the virus changes, the world changes. It makes you wonder, if a virus can mutate, if the world itself can mutate so drastically, how much do we allow our own expectations to mutate?
That's a great point.
You know, expectations for art, for what a sequel should be, even for how we think about survival and what comes next. What boundaries are we willing to see shift, both on screen and maybe within ourselves? What do we carry forward when everything feels like it's changed?